Hi, I'm Michael Casey. Many of you may know me from the hat I used to wear. I was the Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk, and I was the Chairman of Consensus. As Raj announced, I'm now actually the chair of the thing called the Decentralized AI Society, and we literally launched today, very excited about it. But Richard, I'm not here to actually talk about that. We're here to talk about you. You're the one under the microscope, not me. And so let's get into it, right? You have one of the most interesting positions that I think a CEO could have, where your founder, as everybody in this room knows, is in jail. There's no secrets about this. 2 weeks' time, he's out, right?
Yeah, less than that, I think.
So just describe what that's like. Like, clearly a big responsibility on you to right the ship, to get everything kosher. What's it been like, and what is the actual mindset that you've brought to the task in the context of having CZ in this situation?
Sure. So it is first a privilege and an honor to be approached by CZ and the rest of the founders to lead this very important enterprise. Right? So we have an extremely fantastic team of management. We have very dedicated staff. And globally, we have some of the most dedicated community out there, right? So if you look at crypto, it's about community. We are very grateful for our users and community. So today, we serve 225 million users worldwide. We have the largest Web3 ecosystem globally, and we continue to push ahead with that journey. So when CZ was leading the company, it was essentially a founder, CEO-led company, and the landscape was quite different at that point in time. If you remember, Binance started in July 2017, relatively young company, 7-year-old, but the rules and regulations were unclear then, right? Come 2024, this has been a landmark year with greater regulatory certainty, for one. So, roughly about 1/3 of global regulators are starting to regulate this space. That's not the landscape that CZ faced. Secondly, institutional adoption, right? So this year, with ETF approval in the States and subsequently in other places around the world, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, Brazil. So those has really changed the narrative of Web3, of blockchain, of crypto totally, right? So when you have the largest asset money manager in the world, Larry Finn, saying that he went from a skeptic 2 years ago to a believer now, launching ETFs on that front. I think that's a very transformation shift. People don't see that. So on our front as a company, we continue to change as well, right? With the changing landscape. CZ was founder, CEO. I lead a very different company. It's a much more matured company. We have now more than 5,300 staff. We're going to add, at least 1,000 more by the end of the year. We continue to grow. That's our confidence in the sector, right? So we continue to deploy globally. And I report to a board now. So I have a board of directors. So it's a board-led company now. So I work closely with the board directors on our strategy, on our global deployment, et cetera, et cetera. So it is navigating that landscape, right? Because the direction of travel is very clear. Right. It's going to be much more compliant in nature.
So a lot of those new staff that you're bringing on, I believe, are actually in compliance, right? I mean, you've got, how many licenses do you have now?
So we are very happy to announce that we have secured, most recently, regulatory approval in India. And also quite recently, our subsidiary, Toko Crypto, has secured a license in Indonesia. And those are extremely big markets. So we have 19 global...
19, right.
Global regulatory approval, making us the most regulated exchange globally.
And each one of them has their own compliance needs, and so you need to build an army almost to look after that. I mean, how much attention, sort of both in terms of the resource that you're spending in terms of money and staff, are actually dealing with this compliance challenge now?
Well, a huge sum of money, right? Yeah. So in 2022, we started investing in compliance a couple of years back when we saw the direction of travel being very clear that more compliance, more rules and regulations are coming into play. So in 2020, we spent about $158 million. That went up to $213 million. And this year we spend even more, right? So our compliance headcount just to give you some rough figure, right? So it stands, 530 now. We're going to add another 160, 170 more before the end of the year. So we continue to recruit globally for various reasons. Firstly, we continue to deploy globally, and every jurisdiction has different rules and regulations. So if you think through, some jurisdiction define crypto as a security, some define as a commodity, right, which has totally different rules and regulations. Singapore is a digital payment token. And then in some other jurisdiction is a different definition altogether, right? So it's a virtual asset or digital asset, whatever the terminology is. And in each of these places, the rules and regulations are so different that you have to really understand what the provisions are and how to comply with them, and set up your operations accordingly, right? So that it's not possible to have a one-size-fits-all, unlike the banking space or security space, where rules are pretty harmonized across the world, right? So if you run a banking operation, the banking ratios that you have to adhere to are pretty standard. Same for securities market. But this is challenging because we are at the nascent stage of development. But 2024 is the mark of that mainstreaming now, right? So with institutional adoption, which is still very early, right? So we are 5-6% of adoption globally in terms of crypto. So the path forward is going to be very rapid. Just to give you some numbers, right? So we have 225 million users globally now. The first 100 million users took us 5 years to onboard. The second 100 million users took us 2 years to onboard, right? And the third 100 million users will be even faster, right? So that shows the pace of adoption globally. And with institutions starting to do allocation this year alone, the number of institutions, corporate clients that we onboard increased by more than 40%, right? So you see a lot more allocation coming through, but we're just at the beginning of that journey.
So how much has the experience that CZ went through, clearly he pled guilty, paid a high cost, both in terms of a 4-month jail sentence and the fines that had to be paid. How has that informed the way you're treating this compliance challenge?
Oh, treat it very seriously. I mean, first of all, CZ, Binance, we paid a very heavy penalty on it. But what is more important is the lessons learned, right? So when the rules and regulations I mentioned, Binance started in 2017, the rules and regulations was unclear. My previous life, I was a regulator, right? So I was one of the first in the world to come up with a framework to start regulating crypto. And my journey with crypto started then. I started investing in crypto right about 2017 as well. I'm not the type of regulator that regulate banks and don't have a bank account. You're not credible or legit, right? So I started investing, started to know about this space, the beauty of blockchain, and I firmly believe it's going to be the future of finance. But for it to go mainstream, 2017 is, the adoption rate is even much lower compared to today, right? For it to go mainstream, you need these two elements: clear regulation, so that people know how to operate in this space, users know what sort of protection you're entitled to in terms of security, your assets, etc. And institutions will then start adopting that, and with that come mainstreaming. So we see all that coming to pass, right? So I think it's a journey that we navigated through that. It's important for any financial institutions. And, global financial institutions, if you look at the top 100 in the world, they'll run into problems, breaches of rules and regulations at any point in time. But what is important for all of us is, firstly, realize, acknowledge those mistakes, remediate it, become much better, right? So we have, which is why I mentioned, we have invested heavily into the compliance arena. So Binance has always been a user-first platform, right? So our users have been standing by us for the past 7 years. And user confidence, user trust is extremely important. So we actually do a lot of things beyond what regulators prescribe. So we are the first to come out with a SAFU fund, safe asset fund, right? So in the untowards episode that, there's a security incident, right? There's more than 1 billion standing ready, right? And people can check, it's public chain. that to compensate the users. So we are the first to do all those things. We have very strict policies on staff trading, way above what many traditional financial institutions and regulators prescribe, is to make sure that we always place users' interests first on that front. And we continue to do many things that many other exchanges don't do. For instance, this year alone, we helped users avoid 2.4 billion worth of potential losses, right? So, there are scams around. And, we detect things like poison wallets, and we alert our users when they want to do a transfer. So we do a lot of those things to make sure that we go as far as possible to protect the users, right? So, and also we help users, this year alone, recovered close to 80 million worth of money that they lose through things like scams, etc., etc. So that's one aspect that we will continue to focus on throughout the year. We continue to enhance our products and features. But other than user-first organization, it's very important that we use compliance as an advantage. Right? So we have the wherewithal to invest heavily into compliance, finance as an entity. And we intend to use this as a competitive advantage. It is costly.
Yes.
Compliance is extremely costly, as you know. So for maybe smaller, medium-sized enterprise, they find it very tedious to cross those hurdles. But we are able to do it, and we intend to use it as a competitive advantage. So user-first, compliance-first organization.
But I mean, that fact is also a challenge for startups, for smaller players, right? Because there is this view that the cost of compliance as it expands becomes a barrier to entry. And Binance is lucky enough to be as big as it is and able to bear that cost. And as I said, you can use it to your advantage. But you're in an interesting, almost ironic situation because you're also responsible for listing a lot of the tokens and essentially the startups that are a part of that ecosystem. So first of all, I mean, has the compliance, this is a separate issue, but I think it's related, has your focus on compliance meant that your listing requirements have become stricter? I mean, how is it affecting the degree to which you address listings? Well, and secondly, I think, how do you address this challenge that, you want this ecosystem to grow, you actually benefit from the expansion of all these great ideas, and yet they're carrying this burden it's bigger for them relative to what it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think through what we have done, which is pretty consistent over the course of past 7 years, we have been one of the strictest when it comes to listings, right? So, we published a set of listing criteria for anybody that's interested. We sheltered our listing team from direct conversation, is to make sure that they conduct their proper due diligence, free from external influence on that front. So, for any possible listings, we'll look at, who are the founders, what's the background, do they have expertise, what's the possible utility to this, what's the engagement with the community on that front, security, compliance measure that have put in place, right? So a variety of factors that we look at to see whether it's suitable for listings. But, not all projects are suitable at this juncture. We do want to support innovation. That is very important. So we do our best to really support the entire ecosystem, right? So we keep them in check. There are so many different subsectors within crypto, right? So from your infrastructure layer to DeFi to SocialFi to GameFi, and that list goes on. So we keep a close track of developments in all these subsectors to see who are gaining traction, what are they doing, what does the technology represent in terms of innovation, what's the possible utility, and where's their game plan, right? So it's very important to understand what are they building in terms of roadmap. And for those that are lucky enough to be listed, and we're pretty stringent about that, that's not the be-all and end-all. That's the start of the journey, right? We want the projects themselves to continue building for the benefit of users, right? So we have actually a team of people within Binance, other than the people that are looking at potential listings, a team that serve these projects post-listing to make sure that they continue to fulfill their obligations to the users, to the communities, to the platform, right? And if they don't, we actually delist projects as well. Right?
Yeah. So given that you are looking at this innovative landscape and where things are going, what do you see in your crystal ball? Like, I mean, firstly, just give your assessment, if you don't mind, of where the industry as a whole is right now. It's been a rocky ride, as it always is. It's a very volatile. You've been in the space for quite some time now, so you've seen these ups and downs. Where are we? 2024 going into 2025?
Well, my personal belief, not financial advice, I always think that 2025 is going to be a much bigger year than 2024 for crypto. Right? So there are various elements coming into play, including possible rate cuts coming out from the US, and with lower interest rate, it's a boost for risk assets, etc. But for those people that are involved long enough in crypto, crypto normally go through a 4-year cycle, right? So based on past three times, you go through that 4-year cycle, and normally that starts to pick up 160 days after the Bitcoin halving. So if you calculate that, we are probably, 8-9 days away from the 160 days from the halving earlier this year. We did reach an all-time high early part of the year, right? So when, the Bitcoin ETF was introduced, right? So it was hyped up. Yeah. But I think that's an anomaly because of what happened through the approval. So hopefully we see that continuous cycle. There's nothing to suggest it will be otherwise. So regardless of the market, we can't predict. I don't have a crystal ball on that front. I do hope I have a crystal ball, but we are bullish on this sector, right? So what we continue to do is continue to build the best platform out there to serve our users globally, continue to deploy, continue to work with regulatory agencies globally to support crypto adoption. And we work, by virtue of being the largest crypto player, many jurisdictions, when they start looking at how do you embrace and develop this exciting sector. And AI, together with blockchain, will form the architecture of many industries going forward, right? So if you look at it, blockchain technology, AI will be used in supply chain, in financial services. You look across real estate as well, right? So it is a sector of the future. You have the best and brightest in this sector. So governments want to develop this, bring in foreign direct investments. So we work very closely with global governments in terms of their crypto formulation as well.
I'm very glad you mentioned decentralized AI because, as you know, I'm very interested in it. But that's a sectoral and a project-led way of looking at the future. We have to wrap up in a couple of minutes here. But the fact that you've just announced the licenses in India and Indonesia, I think, are an interesting line of thinking about where growth comes from as well, because both of those are very big markets and both are developing markets. In Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country in the world, India, the second largest country in the world. What role do you think developing nations and those communities are going to play in the expansion of crypto going forward?
Huge. So if you look at, data that's being released, right? So in terms of crypto index adoption, India is the top, right, in those markets. And we uncovered that crypto adoption is the fastest when two dimensions are at play. Firstly, slightly lower financial inclusion because people can't get access to the banking system. People can't get access to payments. And crypto becomes that mechanism. It operates 24/7, doesn't sleep. It transmits at a fraction, and a minuscule fraction of the cost of what traditional financial institutions charge. You can do remittance cross-border really instantaneously. You don't have to wait 2-3 days for your money to arrive to your loved ones, your families, etc. Really at a minuscule fraction of the cost, right? So that is the beauty. And we see a huge uptick every time where financial inclusion is slightly lower. Secondly, where the demographics is younger, where the population is much younger, because naturally they are much more tech savvy. If you look at data coming out from the world, the young adults of today, their first investments into assets is into crypto. So the young adults are owning more crypto than stocks globally, right? So in any sector where the youth, the young adults are embracing, that's going to be the industry of the future.
Well, it was actually what drew me into crypto in the first place, was the promise of financial inclusion in the developing world. So it's great to see you guys leading the way there. That's all we have time for now, though. So please, a big round of applause to Richard Teng from Binance.
Thanks, everyone.